I'm a DJ boy, going to Dcentral, minting NFT, farming DeFi, being crypto poor but JPay rich.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks for having us today. All right, so we're going to talk about play-to-earn gaming. Just a quick show of hands. Who have we got here from the play-to-earn community? And actually, let's start with that. Anyone here from the play-to-earn community? Oh, sweet. Okay, awesome. And what about, is there anyone here who's just curious? Not really heard about play-to-earn before? Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys. Okay, well, we'll have something for everyone. So just quickly to introduce myself, my name's Leah Callon-Butler. I'm the director of Emfarsis. We are an investment and advisory firm which is focused on Web3 for social innovation. And I'm also a CoinDesk opinion columnist. And if you've seen the mini documentary Play to Earn, which was all about the rise of NFT gaming in the Philippines, I was the writer and narrator of that mini documentary. So I'd love to have our panelists introduce themselves as well. Victor, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I'm Victor Caribe. I'm the co-founder of Play for Change DAO. And it's funny to say because what inspired us to start Play for Change DAO was the documentary that you created. And for us, it's been a journey of a year now, and we are focusing on onboarding people from underserved communities in Brazil into the Web3, and we find games to be that gateway. And we are doing plenty of experiments, and most of them are being very positive, and I'll be happy to share a lot of the things that we're going through, but basically, we want to create new source of income for them, education, and social transformation, leveraging games in Web3, for sure. So it's a pleasure to be here with you all.
I'm Katrina Wolfe. I am the product director at Laguna Games. We make crypto unicorns, launched just a little over a month ago. So we most of the team came from mobile free-to-play, so that's sort of our background is making mobile free-to-play games, and now we've all transitioned into Web3 and play to earn, play and earn, any of the above.
Right, so I'm Renz, CEO and co-founder of BreederDAO. So my journey really started with Axie Infinity as well. And what we've realized is that, because I'm based out of the Philippines, and a lot of people are too focused on guilds, scholarships, and managers. And what we've realized is that in order to create that economy, you need both demand and supply. And hence we created BreederDAO, which tackles really the supply side. And we call ourselves like the factory of the metaverse. Right now, because the demand is centered around all of these play to earn games, we focus on play to earn. But in the future, it could be anywhere, any metaverse asset that we can create.
And hey everybody, I'm Nico, co-founder of Hola GG, a guild focused on play and earn. Our focus is on the Hispanic markets. We launched 6 months ago as the bear market was starting. We are already the largest in our region doing what we do. So it's been a fast growth, quite organically. And we see our roles, and probably we'll elaborate early on, but we see our roles as an entry into Web3 and gaming being the tip point to access this new economy that's coming.
Awesome, thanks guys. So I just want to tackle something straight up front. This panel is titled Play to Earn, but we have seen a shift in recent times where people are preferring to use the terminology play and earn. So just want to tackle that up front. Who wants to explain what is the shift in thinking here? It seems like sort of basic semantics, but it's very important to some people. So why play and earn? Kat, maybe you could explain from a gameplay aspect.
Yeah, I think so. Play to earn, all these words kind of, there's an earning element, and I think the expectation setting is sort of what's being changed here. And the idea that many of these games in the beginning, there was seemingly an expectation that everyone could earn, and it's this magic money-making machine, and that's certainly optimistic and hopeful, but I think we're all coming to see that it's still a game, it's fun, it's gameplay, you're supposed to be playing something that you enjoy, and that is the value, is we're giving people entertainment and joy. And there is some earning aspect, and I think that's why there's the shift to play and earn. And I've also seen a lot more use of play to own, which is yet another kind of flavor of the same thing. And I sort of often just kind of go with the Web3 gaming to kind of escape the whole earning conversation entirely. So I think there's still a lot more to evolve in terms of the language you use and semantics and exactly how we think about it. I try and think about a lot of it as like community-owned games and how that is a new kind of word that I've been thinking about, of shifting sort of, again, the expectations to more around the community owning the economies and a community owning the games. So that's my thought on it.
I just want to ask, though, maybe Nico and Victor, you could enlighten us. I'm just thinking about from a guild perspective. A lot of people were attracted to these games for the opportunity to earn an income by playing a game. So, how do you think about that shift from play to earn to play and earn?
Yeah, for me, it's a very natural shift, and as you mentioned, if the game is not fun, we can remove the play side and just earn, and there's a lot of games that just click to earn. And I think the sustainability of that game is going to be people trying to cash out as fast as they can because there's no real value being generated in those ecosystems. So whenever we bring a game to our communities, we're responsible for them getting, because most of them never heard about crypto, most of them didn't come through Bitcoin or Ethereum. That's the first interaction they're having with the whole blockchain space. So for us, it's a very sensitive time. So they don't start a game that is going to disappear in the next month. And that's why within the gaming, as we bring games that we trust, that we think there's a solid gameplay, there's token economics behind them, and we see the team working hard to make sure this is happening. Those are the games we work with. And then in parallel, the education side that we provide them as they play, as they learn, and as they earn, they then start downloading MetaMask and interacting with DeFi, and that's when we bring the whole education side as they're playing, and naturally they start being on board and migrating to this space that we are all in right now. So both like play and earn and learn, I think those three are going to be like together, combined, a very powerful force for people to join the movement.
Yeah, and if I may add, I think the point here is about the distribution of wealth that's created, right? Play to earn or play and earn. The reality is that there's wealth generated by these games, and the big changer is that wealth now is being distributed out to participants. It's pretty much the narrative changing from a Web 2 perspective into a Web 3. On Web 2 and gaming, you have massive intermediaries capturing a great part of the revenue that was created inside the game. You have to pay up to 30% to Google Store, App Store, or Facebook, and then you have the publishers that will take another 20% of the piece. So the game developers themselves, just as a start, they were dealing with 30% of those revenues. Now that narrative is changing radically, and the model with Web3 is first go straight to users, to consumers or players, and then be generous about distributing the revenues that are happening inside your platform. I don't remember the number exactly, but I think Axie Infinity was keeping something between 5 or 10% of all revenues, right? And everything else is being distributed out to participants. Then naturally, the state of the industry, it needs to mature. This is an experiment. It's just a couple of years old. The economics or tokenomics, they still have a lot of run rate from here, understanding which is the equilibrium on where you can have a healthy economy inside the game. But I think that's the main change that happened, right? Where revenues now where the players are entitled to the revenues of the game. That's it.
Yeah, so I want to pick up on something there. We've all talked about Axie Infinity. It really was the first breakthrough game, but we've really been on a real journey with that game. We're seeing it now. It's going through a very painful period of economic rebalancing. Had to make some hard decisions in terms of protecting the sustainability of the game. And a quick plug, I've just got to say, BreederDAO has an amazing platform called PlayCore, which is actually following the health of these in-game economies around sort of mint and burn rates and things like that. So, Renz, maybe you could explain a little bit about it. What do game developers need to be thinking about in order to incorporate all of these elements? The game's got to be fun, it's got to have a healthy, sustainable economy. What are the key aspects that we need to be thinking about?
Right. I think play to earn was a good come on for like a lot of people. Before like, Web3 or like blockchain gaming or the idea of Axie Infinity, getting to own your own assets, right? There was really no need for like people or no like real incentive for people to shift to Web3, right? But because like Axie Infinity pioneered or championed this idea of like play to earn, because of the ability to own the assets, then people started moving in, right? I mean, right now people don't understand the value of like owning your assets or being able to, do something about your asset in the future, right? Or like, outliving like the publisher. Because right now you have games on Steam, right, where you also have all of these cosmetics and you can trade them or you can buy and sell them. But like, the idea of outliving or being able to use your assets in a manner that's different from the original source or like the original game is something so powerful that people nowadays do not really understand. And, we ourselves, even though we're actually right here in the space, we don't really see it or we don't really know like where to the extent that it's going to come. But definitely like having the ability to own it is something that's really valuable and people are already starting to see it. But the way that you start with that is by attracting people. And that's why the idea of like the entire play to earn existed, right? So in the future, we go back to the idea of like play and earn, where, you play and at the same time you have the ability to earn, or maybe play to own, or play and own, right? Where you involve the community to actually participate as well. But in the future, I feel like it's gonna go back to its roots of like providing entertainment first and the ability to trade, to sell, or to even like do something else with your asset is going to come at a later point. And that's what we're shifting towards. Right now, we're in constant iteration of what model works, starting with how do we make the economy more sustainable, or how do we make like a game design that's really going to incentivize people to play more than just extracting value from the game, because it makes it easy for us to like extract value from it, or like we make it easy for people to generate all sorts of tokens by playing the game without necessarily investing in it, right? But in the future, we see it as people wanting to play just because they want to play, and they want to own the asset because the assets are actually cute. Similar to how we look at toys nowadays, right? Crypto unicorns, for example, making these characters like cute, makes people want to own it, and that's the shift that we're seeing, at least currently.
To kind of go off of the ownership piece, I think there's also a really cool element of when you have ownership of these assets, you want to maybe make something more with them. And this has been in the game industry forever, Just so many people create mods and make their own little spin-offs and fan art and et cetera. I think that's what I'm really excited to see is when you have ownership of our unicorns, what are people going to go create with them? What new game loops are going to exist that we can then potentially fold into our own? And how does that then provide maybe revenue for someone who's trying to make it as a game developer, and they can create their own little thing and plug it into ours? So I think there's a really cool element that's going to happen with that, and how ownership kind of entitles you to make new art or new work with those things that you own.
While we've got you on the mic, Kat, so we've talked a little bit Axie Infinity, but and we've also covered tokenomics, but we're probably jumping ahead here. Do you want to explain just quickly what Crypto Unicorns is? How does the game actually work?
So Crypto Unicorns, you have unicorns and land. We've released a kind of core farming loop right now. That's the MVP. You can take your unicorns and farm plots of land, earn berries, and use the berries to breed your unicorns, create new ones. And so it's a very small portion of the future vision for the game. And that's sort of the idea is we want to create the rest of it with the community and release kind of the smallest piece and then build it as we go with input from our players. So it's a small piece right now, but it's growing. We have, rainbow tokens and unicorn milk and tokenomics, and it's sort of, we have all the bits and pieces there, and then now we're growing it and have a lot of cool plans for the future.
And just a quick follow-up question. So Laguna Games, the creator of Crypto Unicorns, is actually a Web 2 game developer, right? This is your first NFT game. So, do you think that has influenced the way that you approach building a crypto game? Like, do you guys think differently about it to, say, a crypto native game developer?
I would assume we definitely do. I mean, we all came from mobile free-to-play. So I joined Laguna Games this year, but I also came from mobile free-to-play, so did most of the team. And I think if you go play our game, you would immediately feel like it looks sort of like a mobile game does at certain points in time. I think we learned from free-to-play that farming is a really good core loop that everyone understands. It's actually quite fun. You have these simple loops that anyone can pick up and learn and play. So I think we use a lot of our kind of experience of what's worked in mobile, and then, you know, the way we think about building features and live ops, and we already have quite a bit of experience with, you know, complex economy balancing while also doing live ops and maintaining, you know, release cadences and all those things. So that's sort of our bread and butter, and then it's kind of then figuring out all of these new pieces of how does governance get folded in, and how do we think about, you know, the tokenomics side and what that means with limited currencies and NFTs and that kind of stuff. But it's just our day-to-day talk, so it's pretty much involved in all of our thoughts.
Well, thank you for coming over to the Web3 space, because I'm excited. I wish we had more traditional game developers coming over to this space. But, you know, you're probably an anomaly, because I think we're seeing a lot of pushback from the traditional gaming space against Web3 and NFTs. And this is a question for everyone. I want to say, you know, why is that? And what do we need to do in order to encourage more traditional game developers to get excited about blockchain?
Yeah, I think the industry is still so early. There's still a lot to be done when it comes to infrastructure, gameplay, and the fun aspect. There are some pushbacks where some gamers also say, I don't want to financialize my fun. But what happens is that our games are already financialized. It's just that it's going to the single place, like being concentrated into the hands of single companies and corporations. What's happening now with the NFTs, with the whole ownership economy, is that value is now being distributed and shared amongst the players. And everyone's participating because everyone's creating items and is really building on the lands. And then that share, 90% of the share can be redistributed to the players. So once this concept and people, and I understand like gamers can find quality games that's compared to what they have in traditional gaming, because the industry has existed for so long. But it is coming in the next 1 or 2 years. I think there will be AAA and new great games coming over with good tokenomics, with good gameplay and NFTs built in, interoperability between different ecosystems. So I think that's all. And the best thing is that a lot of this is open source. So if someone solves something here, it can be replicated in different places. So that's why I think innovation is going to be much faster. We have these, even like someone working for one DAO can work for multiple DAOs. So one problem doesn't have to be solved twice. It can be just replicated, and then that's why the industry is going to move much faster than we imagine. And it's great to see this migration from traditional gaming, implementing whether it's just NFTs, and then they can slowly think about the tokenomics. But for me, it's going to be the migration is already happening from game developers, from programmers, from Web 2 to going to Web 3, and all of this is coming in the next few years. Even with the bear market, I think that's something that it's inevitable. So it's great to watch and see which are the great games that we can onboard our community to.
Yes, if I may add, I think resistance is very natural. Gaming is a massive industry with lots of actors that are very living in the comfort zone, enjoying the wealth that they create, and all of a sudden you have a new business model that speaks about a distribution of 90+% of whatever is created. So naturally that makes big names very uncomfortable, right? Some will adapt and evolve, some will neglect it and maybe stay on their models, and new companies and new groups will emerge and embrace this new trend, and I think that's the real opportunity. I do believe the trend is super strong and hard to stop because it's direct to consumer, so the demand is not being pushed by anyone. These are gamers and people simply picking to choose Axie Infinity and picking to choose Web3 games. So there's very little you can do to stop that movement. And what can I also share is that the confidence that AAA games are coming to the space, I think they will start approaching very, very soon, definitely before the end of this year. And these are the games that naturally, by definition, they take longer in production, maybe some years. So this is the pipeline of exciting projects that are coming into the space. So once you combine high-quality games with the audience that's engaged, with the right economics that's providing the incentives for everybody to participate, that's where you have a whole new economy. I believe this is the early phases of a metaverse. It's just not the gaming industry. this is where people will spend time online in the future. So gaming, in my mind, it is an excuse to make things entertainment, attractive, fun. But in the end, people are spending time online, and these games will start providing value in different ways. And then companies will find ways of participating in these games and communicating with their audience in different places. In the end, the economy will shift, and maybe the eyeballs now we're more on the traditional internet, and maybe the eyeballs tomorrow will be on a metaverse landscape. And I think that's the evolution that we are starting to experience.
Right. I mean, for me, it's really just about like waiting, right? A lot of these publishers are already very successful in the free-to-play, and they're earning tons of revenue from it. And then you have all of these like Web3 games who, at the start, like experience like this hyper growth, but eventually declines, right? So it's really just them like waiting to see like a proof of concept or something that would really change the game, where in fact that you don't have to necessarily just die like after the initial hyper growth, and they're just waiting to see and letting these guys like do the R&D. And once they actually come up with a proper formula, then they enter and kind of like really dominate the space. But yeah, for me, it's really just a waiting game. I don't see that a lot of people, even though the bigger traditional games are not or adamant about like entering the space, you already have people from within those developers that are already like moving into. You have ex-Riot Games, ex-EAs, executives who are already moving and then developing their own game. Because again, as mentioned earlier, you don't like, or you give back like 30%, where initially you give it to Google or you give it to Apple, right? Right now you can give it back to the community, or you can give it back to developers to further the growth of whatever it is that they're doing. So people are already seeing value, and a lot of these traditional executives or traditional gaming, or executives from traditional gaming companies are already moving towards the space, and it's a movement that I believe cannot be stopped.
Yeah, I was just going to add that all of this, I think the reason that mobile game developers are more likely to come over is because it feels the same as when mobile free-to-play started. It has the same kind of pushback. It has people kind of reeling at this idea of how you're monetizing people, and it's changing, and it's just hard. Change is hard. I think anyone who's released a feature to anyone ever realizes change is hard. That's another thing, is that games are also hard. And if you've worked in games, it's hard to find the fun. And that is a time-consuming effort, and it takes innovation, and it takes work, and it takes trying different things. And I think that's where we're at right now in this industry. It's a bunch of people trying to find the fun and trying to figure out what is the thing that's going to stick for 5 years and 10 years. So I think once more people figure that out, then the big players are going to come in. I totally agree with you. So it's going to happen, but we're just kind of in that needing to figure it out phase, which is why I'm loving it. It's super fun to be in that phase, to figure that out and destroy the mobile free-to-play playbook and create a whole new one.
I actually love that about the games industry, though, in terms of this, clear obsession with ensuring that these games are really fun. And I can totally understand, too, why it would be frustrating when you see these crypto games coming out of it's, just click to earn or something, and it's just game developers are offended. Like Kat and I were just hanging out at the game developers conference, and I was hanging out there and looking at textbooks that game developers read when they're learning how to get into this industry, and there's entire chapters on fun. What is fun? It's like this science and art, and I really love that about it, which is why I think we need more people in the space who really understand that science and art. But I just want to pick up on something you said too, Renz, about it being a waiting game. It kind of reminds me in terms of, remember years ago when it was like, banks are never going to get into crypto. Why would banks move over to crypto? Oh my God, it's going to disrupt their model. And hello CBDCs, hello every single private blockchain that every bank is launching. So I agree with you. I think it's a waiting game. But quick segue. So we're talking about what's next for play to earn. And I think BreederDAO is a really innovative idea. We had blockchain games burst onto the space. We've got guilds, but Renz, you did touch on this before, but can you just explain what exactly is it that BreederDAO does and what problem does it solve? Maybe you could even use crypto unicorns as an example. Because you guys are partnered, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We're partners actually, and we're partners as well with the guilds as well.
We are.
So yeah, let me touch on that briefly. Well, as mentioned earlier, we tackle on the supply side of things, but we don't just produce assets blindly, right? Within like these assets, there are what we call like traits as well. Axie Infinity has 6 traits, for example, for every part, and the combination of these traits determine whether or not you're gonna win in the match or not. And the same with crypto unicorns, right? You have all of these like stats. And the combination of attack, move speeds, attack speed really affects like the kind of game that you're gonna play eventually. So what they're developing would be racing, jousting, and each of the stat will actually play a different role on the specific games. And what we do is we optimize for specific traits depending on the demand for these like guilds, like Play It Forward and all the GG, right? So if we see the demand going towards, people who are more inclined towards racing, then we optimize for movement speed, right? And that's actually the science behind it, because it's not as simple as just combining any two that has like the maximum speed, right? There's also a lot of elements that play into effect, like depending on the mechanics of the game. Right now they haven't released as much, but eventually we studied these things. With Axie Infinity, how we did it was we tried and analyzed like the meta. We have people who are actually just playing the game, studying what actually dominates like a specific MMR, for example, and that's where we actually optimize for specific traits. And then as you go up the ladder, it's a different meta, it's a different gameplay, and so you need like different set of axes or assets, right? And depending on the requirements of these buyers, the guilds, the marketplace users as well, we then tailored it to specifications so that we're allowed to capture the market as well in terms of providing a solution to whatever game type or game kind that they actually want.
It's such a fascinating space. I had the pleasure of interviewing Chong, who is the co-founder of Axie Infinity, and he got into this space because he was so obsessed with reverse engineering the genealogy of CryptoKitties and wanted to create a game that had a similar kind of thing. So maybe you could talk a little bit about a typical customer. So a guild, for example, might go to BreederDAO and order assets. Like, how does that work?
Right, so there are 2 ways that we actually work with guilds. The first one is what we call like breeding as a service, whereby we actually use our technology that allows to produce these assets at scale, and then just allow them to leverage off of that so that they can support whatever demand they have, right? So in fact, we ask them, for example, what they want to develop, what they have in their inventory, and then we want us to produce like a specific set of like traits, and then we mass produce them using the technology and the manpower that we have. Now, there's this other thing that we actually help them with, at least via consultation, on the kinds of assets that they want, or depending on the MMR or the quota that they have for their scholars, right? Or the kind of scholars, whether they're newbies or like veterans, or like they want to compete in like esports level, or just typical average players, right? So we kind of have recommended builds that we share to them, and then it's up to them whether or not to choose. So think of it as like a department store where you get to choose like whatever it is that you want, and then we just ship it out to you. Of course, the longer the time frame and the more time that we have to actually produce these assets, the cheaper it costs, because we're able to optimize for specific costs, right? If it's like manpower, for example, or if it's like allowing us to buy the resources at a cheaper price, because you need like the initial axes to be able to produce these assets, or like you need tokens like SLP or AXS to be able to produce this. Now, if you can time the market properly in terms of buying these resources like at a cheaper rate, then the cost to produce this will be cheaper, hence the final product as well will be cheaper. So yeah, that's how we work with them.
So while on the topic of guilds, so you guys are accumulating these assets, and I think, guilds really blew up sort of around mid-2021. We were seeing so many different ones launch, and I think the original role of guilds was really to provide scholarships for anyone who wanted to get into these blockchain games. Perhaps they couldn't afford the assets themselves, or maybe they just didn't want to own, they wanted to be able to play multiple games, whatever. But I think we're seeing the role of guilds evolve and change over time. So I'd love to hear from you, Nico. Maybe you could kick us off, and also, I'd love to hear how it's different between, say, Hispanic communities versus what it's like in Brazil. Where are parallels and differences?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to start with the high-level picture here and the reality of emerging markets and the reality of a Web3 economy. The reality is that we are privileged to be paying attention to what's going on in Web3. You can easily say that Web3 is the economy of the future, right? This is where things are going. Now, the reality of emerging markets, by definition, with half the population without access to banks and more than half the population either between poverty or just making it check by check, they can't afford to think about what's the economy of the future. They are too immersed in the economy of the present, right? So I see our role as guilds facilitating everything that's needed in order for our audience to participate in this economy of the future, Web3 or the metaverse. The way we do it, we have two main verticals here. The first one is financing, and you mentioned, Leah, we provide scholarships. So if you want to play and you can purchase the NFT, we can do that for you. It's kind of it's not a rent, it's basically a revenue sharing agreement where if you produce X many, we divide the earnings between two. Not half and half, we are quite generous with the gamers, but that's basically how it works. But then, what else can you be doing? If you already own an NFT, what's the value that you can be producing out of that NFT, and how does it bring value to yourselves as a player to be part of a broader community? So there are different services and products that we are envisioning and working on, so you can get the most out of your assets that you own, in-game assets as NFTs, and being part of a community. Then comes education, right? Again, I think we are privileged because we have time to think and to read and to educate ourselves into what all this means. But accessing Web3 is not easy. So education comes with a little bit on hand-holding initially on the how to set up your wallet, how to participate in the game, how to become a better player. But then it comes with a huge responsibility, in my opinion, because what we're talking here is adding monetary value into the wallets of our audience. And what do you do next? How can you participate responsibly in owning that wealth in your wallet? And then comes DeFi, for example, the other big Web3 trend. DeFi, in a way, democratizes access to the best financial services. These economies, emerging economies, the quality of the financial services and products was either very expensive or very poor. And now, all of a sudden, everybody can access the same staking platform, the same investing platform, and the best digital products in the world. So I think our role as a guild has to do with helping our audience, our community, access Web3 and participate into Web3 in the most responsible and sustainable manner.
We're coming right up to time, but I'd love to hear if you've got anything to add to that, Victor, and perhaps to how the community plays into that education piece as well.
For sure, I agree 100%. And 1.7 billion people on banks. And in Brazil, we decided to go after the most underserved areas. So we partner with NGOs because we need their voice and we need them to believe that this is actually happening. And so we meet with the leaders from those communities. Like if you've been to Rio de Janeiro, there's a favela called Rocinha, which has 200,000 people living there. A lot of them are unbanked. So we onboard them through that. And the gaming help us so we don't have to go directly to DeFi or present them why Bitcoin matters. And they go through the games, and once they have to cash out to pay for food or basic needs, that's when they realize, oh, maybe I will need a digital wallet or I'll need to connect to a crypto exchange. And so they get into that path more naturally than going straight to explain why blockchain is important. And so the NGOs have been very important in that process. One of the founders of the NGO actually is part of Play for Change now as a core team. She's leading other NGOs to participate. She's setting the example, and now she's part of Ethereum Brazil. She's speaking in events. If you look at her Instagram, it's all about Web3. So that actually spreads around much faster than we thought. So 6 months since she joined, it became like a real thing, and now we are exploring more and more communities, and everything that we're doing that can be replicated to, I'm sure, like other Latin American countries, but as well as like Africa and the Philippines. The penetration of smartphones are very high, and so that's why we prioritize mobile game for now. But even though then the NGOs, they have laptops if we need to use. And so after that, we prioritize the education. So we bring them programming lessons on Web3. We bring them game design because we want them to find job opportunities within the metaverse. Because the metaverse doesn't matter where you were born. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. Everyone is equal. and why Bitcoin DeFi doesn't really select people based on family connections or anything. It want them to believe that and see that the world has changed. So now if they have a smartphone, an internet connection, and a digital wallet, and the right skill set, then they can just do anything they want. I mean, they don't have to rely only on their local economy. Just like a lot of the place that they live is ruled by cartels, and that's a challenge for us too. I mean, we go there sometimes in person, but we try to do everything digitally so they can work from home for the first time in a favela. So a lot of things are changing, and there have been examples to all of their friends, instead of joining the traffic route and selling drugs, then they can maybe play a game and start earning, start learning, and we're kind of working that infrastructure to make sure that the onboarding process is as easy as it gets for them.
Yeah, that's definitely why I fell in love with it in the first time too. I'd spent so many years, trying to convince people to download a crypto wallet and jump through all the hoops to figure out how to use crypto. Then when you've flipped it on the other side, it's like, why don't you play this cute, fun game, earn some tokens, and then you could cash it out? Suddenly that incentive was there. I am so sad to say that we are actually at time. I feel like I could talk to you guys for another 3 hours. But thank you so much for coming along to listen. We'll be outside if you want to chat.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.